Hey there, Review family. I wanted to talk to you about something that has been circulating massively that has had me absolutely infuriated to hear and see the responses for, and that is the Blue Ridge Rockfest fiasco. And I wanted to talk about this for two reasons. The first being, I had an incredibly horrible experience that I documented back in 2021 when I attended the festival, but also, I had tickets to go this year, and I ended up not going. And I wanted to talk about some of the responses in the outrage of Blue Ridge Rockfest and give my opinions on the whole thing, because if you have been anywhere in the rock and metal sphere, you have without a doubt seen something about Blue Ridge Rockfest and the massive oversights that not only the people on the top made to create this whole just debacle and catastrophe, but the continuous mishandling of the festival that drew in over 60,000 people this year. It's a Virginian rock and metal festival that happened this year. I went back in 2021. I have been familiar with Blue Ridge Rock Fest for a while, and when I went to it in 2021, there was a whole host of issues, and I ended up having to leave early because I got very badly injured because I was crowd killed in a mosh pit and ended up fucking both of my elbows up, had to leave early. But a lot of the things that I have been hearing people talk about, I think that I have a very unique experience about, that being I have so much deja vu from what people are describing and the horrors that they are saying they experienced during this. It seems even more amplified, and considering last year in 2022, it seemed like a middle ground where you didn't hear as much, I suppose, bad things coming of it as you did in 2021 and especially 2023. And I just wanted to say I apologize to anyone who had to go through that, and especially people that might be overseas or from other places in the country far away that spent thousands upon thousands of dollars, took off time from work, left their families, maybe even flew overseas, had to deal with passports and airplanes and things of that nature, and spent thousands of dollars on things like parking and hotels and food, only to not only get the experience that you paid for and get the full extent of it, but literally be disregarded in every single way that a consumer possibly can be. It disappoints me to see what was occurring there, and like I said, it's deja vu central. The major things I have been hearing about are things like weather reports where they evacuated the campgrounds due to a tornado warning without any sort of proper evacuation planning, as well as I went on Twitter and I was looking through people's stories. I've been on Reddit forums and I've seen people sharing videos and photos of trash cans that were piled up and just porta potties that were overflowing, no access to any porta potties, low or just completely non-existent water accessibility, excuse me. And I have been watching other videos from some other creators, and I have seen and heard the things that happened behind the scenes with other people, other band members, entire bands, roadies, and the lack of communication that was presented. I'm going to be posting some other videos if you want to watch them after this, if you're unfamiliar with what's going on, from some other creators sharing their experiences, because everyone's experience is unique, but I mostly want to talk about the fan perspective of going there. When I went in 2021, the waits were absolutely excruciating. Even if you paid for parking, you were not given any sort of guidance of where the parking was, and even then, it was so far away that it made it almost not even matter. The quote-unquote shuttles, which were just shoddy school buses driven by people who were commissioned to do it and weren't even connected to the festival themselves, were literally taking hours to get there. There was so much traffic, there was so much backing up, there was no sort of organization with directions in any form or fashion. There was a promise of transportation on the campgrounds that literally never happened. There was always this talk of how you could get transportation at any point. That was an absolute fabrication. That didn't fucking exist. There was occasionally people selling rides on these golf carts that would go across the campgrounds that maximum held 4, 5, maybe 6 people. And in a festival where you are having to walk pretty much multiple football fields to get from one place to another dozens of times a day, one golf cart isn't going to do much for tens of thousands of people whose feet are hurting, who are overheated, and do not have proper access to any sort of food, any sort of water, any sort of transportation, and have already spent their day having to jump over hurdles and hoops just to get the festival experience that they paid for, having to travel miles and miles just to get there. And that's not even getting into the absolute nightmare that I've heard from campground goers that was dealing with flooding. And I know that was an issue in my year as well, not to the same degree. I don't believe that there was any flooding because luckily in 2021 there really wasn't that much horrible weather that was going on. It was just blazing hot, and they mismanaged the organization of the stages, the distance between the stages, how they organized who was playing when and where, conflicting bands that people would want to see at the same time, and the fact that there seemed to be no rhyme or reason to who was performing where at any given point. It made it very difficult to bear the heat that was reaching up in the 90s. The humidity was horrific, and they gave you no outlet to try to make that any better. It literally seemed like everything that they were doing at these campgrounds and everything that they were doing at the festival as a whole was to make it as difficult as possible for you to enjoy your experience. And especially at the end of the day when you would have to go home, the buses were pretty much non-existent. There was so many people needing some sort of transportation that had literally been there 8, 9, 10 plus hours moshing, watching bands, and having to walk to and from, and not having any access to anything that could have made it easier. There was no sort of accommodations whatsoever. So much so to the point to where, and I've heard that this has happened with the current year as well, people were literally cutting off from waiting for shuttles and just walking, having to walk about an hour, hour and a half. The second day that I attended in 2021, when I fucked my elbows up, we were leaving at the end of the day, and we waited for a while at an area that was supposed to bring a shuttle bus, and there wasn't any in sight for around 30-45 minutes until, sort of in a herd-like mentality, like a fucking hive mind, everyone went at the same point, and there kind of was this Lord of the Rings journey with about 150 people, at least in the group that I was in, because this was at it was after Rob Zombie's set, and it was around 10:30, 11 at night. It was pitch black. They did not have any street lights. They didn't have any street lamps. They had no sort of LED panels. They had nothing to be able to see your way. It was extremely dangerous for people that were walking, especially considering that people that attend these things most of the time will not wear bright colors. You will see a lot of dark hues. I was wearing dark hues, and it was insane because it was genuinely just unsafe. The stretch of land that connected the parking lots to the camp and the festival itself was so far away and such a narrow road that you were having to battle not only the shuttle buses when they came through, these massive things that barely fit on the road, but not only cars, people on either sides of the roads trying to figure out where the hell they're supposed to go in pitch black darkness with no form of any guidance, any people with signs, no one helping. They literally just left you out to dry after everything that they did. It was horrific. And by the time you finally got back to your car, it was an hour, hour and a half later, and you still had to get out of the parking lot, which was this shoddy place with one fucking exit to and from, and they overbooked the parking that we paid for, and you could pay for parking, and you had different options for, excuse me, how you could do parking. We ended up paying for parking, and it didn't matter because we didn't even get to park in the parking lot. We had to end up parking in this sort of grass field that was attached to it that was an extension of the parking lot, where you had to park on an incline on this dirt grass hill that you had to literally go out one entrance or exit both to and from, and you can imagine how backed up that ended up getting and how congested that ended up getting. And that's not even getting into how they, like I said earlier, they just made bands conflict at times they shouldn't have. It just didn't work. This year I have heard so much worse than in my year. The time that I injured my elbows, and I've heard stories about this year as well. I was crowd killed in a mosh pit. I ended up getting catapulted when I was not participating in the mosh pit. I was in a cooldown period, and someone grabbed me by the back and pushed me as hard as they could into the crowd, into an active mosh pit right before a breakdown. It was during Asking Alexandria's set. I ended up coming down on both of my palms and pretty much fractured both of my elbows. I had trouble getting up. I was dizzy. They had one medic tent, just one. There were two people working at that medic tent. I went there and they were not able to do a single thing for me. They had no equipment on standby. They had no pain relievers on standby. They didn't offer me any sort of brace. They didn't offer me any sort of support. They didn't even check me properly. I was the only person there, and they lifted both of my elbows and pretty much figured out something was wrong. I lost all of my range of motion. They did not help whatsoever. And throughout the day, anytime there were injuries, it was oftentimes taking extremely long periods for anyone to respond or do anything. I remember on the second day, I Prevail's set was on a far downhill. Someone got very injured and was bleeding from their head, and they cut off from the crowd. They were needing immediate medical assistance, and the people that were supposed to help didn't really give them much or do anything. They had to call an off-site ambulance from a hospital that was not anywhere near the venue, and it took through I Prevail's entire set, which ended up being around an hour's worth of time, for someone to actually respond and help this person. And if someone would have had a more severe injury, if someone would have been in more mortal danger, they genuinely could have died at this festival. They had no ambulances on site. They had no one on site to help in any way immediately with any sort of painkillers or morphine or braces or anesthesia. Literally nothing. Their medical team at a festival where at any point someone could get extremely injured, they were intended to be claustrophobic. There was no help, and that could have costed someone. This year, I have heard similar things about medical issues where they did not have any proper medical aid from literally anyone. And the things that I've heard is that it got even worse with porta potties. It got even worse with the water situation. I heard that there was only one water station and only about 6 or 7 porta potties that were overflowing within 12 hours. I believe I heard that from Nick Nocturnal's video. And at least in the year I went, there was a line of about 30 or 40 porta potties. They were marked with either a green or red sign, depending on when you locked the door, so you knew who was in, who wasn't. But they didn't clean them at any point during the day. They didn't try to clean them. Every single porta potty was disgusting, overflowing. It was actually hideous. There were very few trash cans on the premises. There were maximum maybe 3 or 4, and at no point was there anyone whose job was to go around cleaning them. Not even just one person traveling around, putting the shit in a bag, taking it away. Every single garbage can within the first 30 minutes to an hour was completely overflowing in a circular motion. It got to the point to where anyone would just drop their materials on the ground, drop their cans on the ground, drop their waters on the ground. They jacked up and price gouged every single bit of water, food, Monster Energy, whatever it may be, and the food lines were absolutely atrocious. For tens of thousands of people, they had maybe 8 or 9 small tents cooking food when they could have had an entire field. There was so much available flat land, and not only did they choose to leave it so small, it seems like to me, and I've spoken to this with my father, it really does seem like they spent their entire budget and care on getting the bands, getting them there, and then nothing else. Not only, this is not just an oversight for planning. This isn't just an oversight for not communicating. This is a complete dismissal of the consumers that care about your festival. Not only does there need to be accountability, there needs to be refunds. there needs to be some sort of compensation. Blue Ridge Rock Fest has been handling this incredibly poorly, with not only pre-sale tickets for their 2024 festival next year, but actively taking down updates online of the festival itself and not making any sort of reasonable statements. They're constantly blaming and dismissing and deflecting on other things, blaming anything else but their own actions. Because there are certain things you cannot control. You cannot control weather. You can't control those types of things. But what you can control is giving the artist and the bands that are playing your festival and the exact reason that people are drawn to your festival to begin with a damn good platform to be able to play their shows. These bigger bands don't fucking need you. But do you know who does? The small bands that are on tour, that could have went somewhere else, that had the opportunity to get their music out there, and so they booked themselves here. They worked to get this. And not only did you take that away from them, you gave them such an incredibly poor experience for people to attach to them and to the festival for no fault of their own, and you've left a bad taste in the mouths of so many people. There are so many festivals in the US for rock and metal. You are going to get replaced. There are plenty of other options, not only internationally, but specifically in the States. And people are going to realize you don't get fooled more than once or twice. People keep giving Blue Ridge Rock Fest a chance, and in 2022, it was fine. But consistently, year after year, it has been proven to be a deja vu cycle. It is absolutely repetitive, and it is an indication of the lack of care that is put into upkeeping this, but preparing for this. This was prepared months and months and months and months in advance. This isn't just a spur-of-the-moment thing. This isn't something that just cropped up after a week. There are people that pre-bought tickets months in advance. I was supposed to go to Blue Ridge Rock Fest this year, and I have had tickets for months. My tickets did not arrive until a week and a half before the show began. I got an email when I ordered my tickets that I was supposed to get things within about a month and a half before the show. I got mine a week and a half before, so much so that I was worried I wasn't going to get it. I'm not going to go into why I didn't end up going, but I didn't end up going, and I am so glad I didn't. And if I ever go to a music festival again or a rock and metal festival, I will not be going to Blue Ridge Rock Fest. It is a stain on the metal and rock community for no fault of the fans, for no fault of the bands, and for no fault of the people that are working their asses off, doing jobs that they shouldn't have to be doing because the people on the higher ups money grubbed and wanted to get their filthy little hands on a festival where they overbooked by over 10,000 fucking people. It's disgusting, it's incorrigible, and it's disappointing. It's infuriating. And if there's not some sort of compensation in some way for the people that gave their lives, their hard-earned money, their energy, and planned entire trips to go to this festival that meant so much to them, I don't know what's going to happen. And I don't think there's going to be a Blue Ridge Rock Fest that people trust again. There may be people that go. This may still exist, but I think you are going to see a massive decline in the people that trust Blue Ridge Rock Fest. Because one time can be an outlier, but if it happens more than once, it shows that you just don't give a shit. And I hope that it's a lesson learned not only to fans to not trust Blue Ridge Rock Fest again, but to the owners to get their fucking act together and figure out how to actually make a festival that honors the people that are paying their money to come to your festival and honor the bands that are willing to grace your stages to give you a festival in the first place. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'll talk to you later.